Evelyn, FedEx.
FedEx. So I feel like it's kind of a big name today, right? There's tons of headlines surrounding it. They also have earnings after the market closes today. And I mean, some of those headlines circle around Amazon, but then also most recently, FedEx is suing the U.S. government based on some trade concerns and also how they handled a package delivered to the U.S. that contained a device from Chinese telecom giant Huawei.
Right.
But circling away from that, Andy, I know that you've said before that you like when a stock is really beaten up, when investors have low expectations of a stock going into earnings. And I would say that FedEx kind of is that kind of company today, especially after the past 2 days, losing 2.5% yesterday and then doing that again today. So what do you think of it going into earnings?
Yeah, well, usually we like companies that are beaten up when we don't see the reasons for it being so beat up. In this case, when we look at LikeFolio data, we actually do see why FedEx is being beaten up. Purchase intent mentions, according to LikeFolio data, which are a measurement of people talking about actually shipping packages, receiving packages from FedEx, down slightly year over year after several years of really nice growth in our data. And so that's concerning. It shows us that the concerns around FedEx are most likely rooted in truth. And so we do think that FedEx is going to continue to have a little bit of a struggle as it comes to this earnings call and possibly into the next one. There's a little bit of a global slowdown. They've already warned. That's the good news for investors. So a lot of the negativity may be baked into the cake at this point. But from our perspective, this is not, the kind of divergence play that we normally get excited about, where we see the stock moving in the opposite direction of what we're seeing happening on Main Street. These are pretty aligned. And I think, Evelyn, you bring up good points about all the other reasons that that FedEx investors are going to have concerns going into this earnings call, from suing your own government to canceling your biggest contracts. It seems like possibly the revenue numbers and earnings numbers will be a blip on the radar compared to the total conversation that's going on.
Andy, you're kind of getting into where my question is going to be, and here's my question. If you come out and say, like they did yesterday, that you're going to sue the United States government, right? And whether they have a reason to or not, or a legitimate case, do you guys see, here's my question to you, do you guys see an immediate reaction in your data, or is it something that evolves slower over time? Because that's a pretty big statement he came out and made yesterday. Did you see any, real-time reaction?
Yeah, there's a real-time reaction in terms of the number of people talking about FedEx, the company, but not really impactful on people talking about getting packages, sending packages, the purchase intent mentions, which is our key metric. And so I think that it takes a little while for those things to evolve. I don't really see that this lawsuit against the government being impacting consumer behavior in any way. There's no backlash against that. But I do think that it puts FedEx in a defensive position when they were already in one, going into kind of a global trade slowdown and trade wars type of question. So they've just got a lot of negative questions to field in the earnings call, which you don't normally want to see going into an event like this.
So Andy, that's a great point, because when I was combing Twitter to try to find tweets for this segment, I saw a bunch of people just retweeting articles and everything, but nothing really got down to how people use this company. And it took me a while to find that content, right? And so I do have a tweet about that sort of puts FedEx and Amazon next to each other, especially since FedEx recently cut their contract with Amazon. And from Conrad, who says, "My favorite part is that they have implemented real-time tracking of your package, which is so freaking cool. Furthermore, I had received a phone call from the driver because he couldn't access the building. At FedEx could learn a thing or two from Amazon." So all of those positive sentiments were about Amazon's delivery. And actually, personally, I had an Amazon driver do the same thing and call me when they couldn't deliver my package. And I'm wondering, are you seeing that in your data as well, that FedEx isn't stacking up against its new and old competitors?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why FedEx dropped the Amazon contract, because it's only 1.4% of their revenue or something like that. But at some point, FedEx has to feel like they're simply subsidizing their up and coming and potentially better competitor. And so I think that's part of the reason FedEx got out of that game and said, look, Amazon, if you're going to become a logistics company, and especially if you're going to be satisfying customers better than us, we need to focus on what we do rather than your business. And so I think that's really the extent of what FedEx did with Amazon. It's probably a smart move to let Amazon go off and do its own thing. On the other hand, sometimes with Amazon, we'll see the opposite is, kind of there's a guy in a U-Haul who just brought a package up to my front door. He doesn't wear any Amazon clothing, and now he's taking a picture of what he just left. So there's some creepy factor, too, with Amazon that I think they've got to get over. But overall, I think you make a good point that maybe Amazon is out FedExing FedEx in some ways, and FedEx is kind of tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the Amazon effect that we've seen on all the different industries. I mean, we've seen the amount of disruption we've seen that they've had across, Netflix, kind of what Netflix did to, how we consume content, but they're really basically all in on this logistics size, Amazon that is, in terms of quicker delivery and making things basically really easy to track, as Evelyn points out as well, that, they're playing a game of offense, whereas you mentioned FedEx is playing a little bit more defense. It's going to be I think it's going to be tough for them to compete with Amazon given, where they're coming from in terms of how many chips they have really to play.
Yeah, I think the good news for FedEx, though, long term, is that Amazon isn't the only game in town. You're starting to see the growth of these smaller online retailers, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Etsy's, and all these Shopify's. So you have a lot of places where packages could be coming from. It's not just going to be Amazon. They're not going to maintain 50+% of market share in e-commerce. And so I think FedEx has a broadening universe of potential customers that they need to be focused on serving, and they're probably moving in the right direction in doing so.
Really quickly, too, the Amazon Air is expanding its reach toward Asia. They are going to begin operations out of a new Alaska airport beginning on June 27th. But our next tweet is from Harris, who says, FedEx cut their dividend for the first time in 10 years. They no longer have a contract with Amazon, are offering deep discounts to get merchants to compete with UPS. Also, the trade war is having an impact. I thought about a short put, but chickened out. So this kind of goes specifically toward FedEx around earnings and how people will really play this company.
Well, here's why, right? When you're anticipating bad news or thinking about bad news, number one, is it going to be as bad as you thought? Because remember what Andy said, they pre-announced, right? They already guided lower, and the stock's down from 260 to 150, just above what now 150. 56. So a lot of the bad news is pretty much in.
And it's down $12 in just the last 3 sessions. Right. Andy, that brings me to the last thing I want to do before we let you go here is, if you do, let's say hypothetically, get a down move tomorrow just to the expected move. So let's say we're right around 150, 148. Does that change your guys' outlook on this company opportunity-wise, or are you still thinking everything looks a little shaky for the next couple quarters and maybe it's a pass?
Still looks a little shaky, but I think it starts to become a little bit more of a value type of play, like Evelyn, brought up at the very beginning. You get beaten down to a certain point, and you're talking about still a very good company that executes really well, that just is facing some headwinds. And so, I think every once in a while as traders, we should applaud, a guy like Harris saying he chickened out. Looks, a lot of times the best move is no move. And so I think that's great to put that out on Twitter like that. I think after this earnings call, we'll see where FedEx opens up. If it's down a little bit, we'll start to look at it, and we'll start to look at that. The current quarter doesn't look so bad for FedEx. It looks better than a year over year, which would be a nice change. We still need to see more data to know more, though, and we'll do that tomorrow and later this week.